I'm Evelyn Carter, 68, a widow who thought a family barbecue would bring us closer. Instead, my granddaughter Lila's sneer, "That dress is so old," cut me deep, her words echoed by my daughter-in-law's silence. The betrayal stung, shaking my faith in the family I'd poured my heart into. I've spent my life as a seamstress, stitching love into every seam, but that day I felt invisible. Instead of breaking, I decided to fight back. I took Lila's favorite fashion brand, Vibe Vogue, and made it mine. This is my story of turning pain into power, of proving I'm not old but unstoppable, and of wrestling with whether I can forgive the family that hurt me. Will I get my revenge? Subscribe and let me know where you're reading from. Let's dive into this story together. I was 68 when my world tilted, the kind of shift that makes you question everything you thought you knew about family. It was a Sunday in September, one of those golden afternoons where the air smells of crisp leaves and grilled corn, and you feel like the world might just hold you gently for a while. I'd been invited to my son Mark's house for a family barbecue, a rare gathering since my husband George passed 3 years ago. I'd spent the morning fussing over my appearance, something I hadn't done in ages. In my closet I found the floral dress I'd sewn myself back when Mark was still in high school, a soft blue number with hydrangea patterns, its hem just grazing my knees. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, stitched with care and memories of George's smile when I wore it. I felt good, maybe even elegant, as I smoothed it over my hips, my silver hair pinned loosely at the nape of my neck. I grabbed the apple pie I'd baked that morning, its cinnamon scent filling my small apartment, and headed to Mark's house, my heart light with the hope of a day filled with laughter and connection. Mark and his wife Karen lived in a tidy suburban home about 20 minutes from my place in upstate New York. Their backyard was already buzzing when I arrived, cousins chasing each other with water guns, aunts gossiping over lemonade, and Mark at the grill, his apron stained with barbecue sauce. Karen, ever the hostess, flitted around with a tray of appetizers, her smile polished but distant. I set my pie on the dessert table, exchanging hugs and small talk with relatives I hadn't seen in months. For a moment I felt like I belonged, like the Evelyn who'd raised a son, supported a husband through his carpentry business, and kept a family together through lean years was still someone who mattered. Then I saw Lila, my 19-year-old granddaughter, standing by the picnic table with her cousin Mia. Lila was scrolling on her phone, her long hair dyed a shade of platinum blonde that screamed rebellion. She'd always been a bit of a firecracker, but I adored her, had since she was a toddler tugging at my apron while I sewed. I'd spent countless hours with her over the years, teaching her how to thread a needle, even making her prom dress 2 years ago, a sleek black gown she'd gushed over. So when her eyes flicked up and landed on me, I smiled, expecting her usual hug. Instead she whispered something to Mia, her lips curling into a smirk. "That dress is so old," she said, loud enough for the words to carry across the yard, sharp and deliberate. Mia giggled, and Lila's smirk widened, her eyes locked on mine for a split second before she turned back to her phone. The words hit like a physical blow, my breath catching in my throat. My hands tightened around the edge of the dessert table, the pie I'd been so proud of now feeling like a foolish offering. I glanced at Karen, who was only a few feet away, refilling someone's glass. She'd heard it. I saw the slight stiffening of her shoulders, but she didn't look up, didn't say a word. Her silence was worse than Lila's sneer, a quiet endorsement of the disrespect. Mark, oblivious as ever, was still at the grill, laughing with his brother-in-law about some football game. The backyard, alive with chatter and clinking glasses, suddenly felt like a stage where I was the punchline, my carefully chosen dress a costume for a role I hadn't signed up for, the outdated grandma. I excused myself, mumbling something about needing the bathroom, and slipped inside. In the guest bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink, splashing cold water on my face to hide the tears prickling my eyes. In the mirror I saw a woman who'd survived losing George to cancer, who'd worked 30 years as a seamstress to keep our family afloat, who'd poured love into every stitch and every moment with her son and granddaughter. I wasn't old in the way Leela meant, out of touch, irrelevant. I was Evelyn Carter, and I'd built a life on grit, love and pride in my work. But in that moment, her words made me feel small, like I'd been reduced to a caricature in my own family. I stayed in the bathroom longer than I meant to, replaying Leela's sneer, Karen's silence, Mark's ignorance. It wasn't just the dress, it was the betrayal woven into it. The way Leela, who I'd loved so fiercely, could dismiss me so casually. The way Karen, who I'd welcomed as a daughter, let it happen. The way Mark, my only child, didn't even notice. I'd raised him to value respect, to cherish family above all, but somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible to them. The hurt settled deep, a mix of heartbreak and something sharper, defiance. I wasn't going to let this define me. That night back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. Leela's words looped in my head, each replay stoking a fire in my chest. I wasn't just angry at her, I was furious at myself for letting her words shake me. I'd spent my life creating beauty, designing clothes that made women feel confident, yet here I was, wounded by a teenager's jab. I opened my laptop, more out of restlessness than purpose, and started scrolling. Leela was obsessed with Vibe Vogue, a trendy clothing brand she flaunted on social media, her Instagram filled with their logoed hoodies and ripped jeans. Curious, I searched for Vibe Vogue. Their website was all flash, bold fonts, neon colors, but the designs felt soulless, mass-produced. Then I stumbled on a news article. Vibe Vogue faces financial ruin as sales plummet. The company was struggling, their stock tanking, their brand losing its edge. I sat back, my heart racing. An idea sparked, wild and reckless, like something George would have called one of my crazy dreams. Could I do something with this? Could I take the very thing Leela worshipped and make it mine? I didn't know how, not yet, but the thought lit something inside me, a defiance I hadn't felt since I was young, fighting to prove myself in a world that underestimated women like me. I wasn't just going to survive this betrayal, I was going to turn it into something extraordinary. The morning after the barbecue, I woke with Leela's sneer still ringing in my ears, her words like a splinter I couldn't ignore. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where George and I used to share coffee and dreams, and stared at the laptop screen. The Vibe Vogue article was still open, its headline taunting me. Vibe Vogue faces financial ruin. I wasn't a businesswoman, not in the way people imagine. Suits and boardrooms weren't my world. I was a seamstress, a woman who'd spent decades turning fabric into stories, stitching confidence into every hem. But something about that article, about the idea of taking Leela's precious brand and making it mine, felt like a fire I couldn't douse. I wasn't sure if it was revenge or redemption I wanted, but I knew I wasn't going to let that moment in the backyard define me. I called Clara, my oldest friend, who'd retired as a financial advisor but still had a spark for adventure. Over tea at her cozy bungalow, I spilled everything. Leela's cruel remark, Karen's silence, Mark's obliviousness, and the wild idea that had kept me up all night. Evie, Clara said, her eyes glinting over her teacup, you've got that look, the one you had when you convinced George to start his carpentry business. Why not buy into Vibe Vogue? You've got the savings from his life insurance, and you know fashion better than those corporate types. It sounded insane. I was 68, not some hotshot investor. But Clara's confidence was like a match to kindling, and my defiance was burning hotter by the minute. For the next 2 weeks I dove into research with a focus I hadn't felt in years. Clara came over daily, her laptop loaded with spreadsheets and stock charts. Vibe Vogue was a mess, mismanaged, overpriced, and out of touch with what people wanted. Their designs were flashy but flimsy, the kind of clothes that fell apart after one wash. Yet their brand name still had cachet with Leela's generation, a kind of trendy allure I could work with. Clara helped me comb through their financials, and we found a chance their stock was dirt cheap and they were desperate for cash. My savings, $200,000 from George's life insurance, money I'd tucked away for emergencies, could buy a controlling stake. It was a gamble that would have made George laugh and shake his head, but he'd always trusted my instincts. I didn't tell Mark or Karen. Leela, of course, was clueless, still posting Vibe Vogue outfits on Instagram like they were her religion. I wanted to keep it that way, until I was ready to show them what I could do. By mid-October I'd made my move. With Clara's guidance, I contacted a broker and bought enough shares to become Vibe Vogue's majority shareholder. The board, a group of tired executives who'd run the company into the ground, didn't care that I was a retired seamstress with no CEO experience. They saw my money and my determination, and that was enough. By November I was in charge, my name on documents I barely understood, my heart pounding with equal parts fear and excitement. My first trip to Vibe Vogue's headquarters in New York was like stepping into a different world. The office was in a sleek high-rise, but inside it was chaos, half-empty cubicles, coffee stains on the carpet, and a team of young designers who looked at me like I'd wandered into the wrong building. I wore my best tailored blazer, one I'd made myself, and stood tall despite their smirks. I'm Evelyn Carter, I said, my voice steady, and we're going to turn this company around. A few rolled their eyes, others whispered, but I didn't flinch. I'd faced worse than skeptical kids. I'd raised a son through tough times, nursed a husband through illness, and kept going when the world felt heavy. These designers didn't know it yet, but they were about to learn what I was made of. I started small, sitting in on design meetings, and listening to their ideas, which were mostly recycled trends from TikTok. I didn't lecture, I observed. Then I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I spent late nights in my hotel room, sketching designs that blended the classic elegance I loved, think tailored coats and flowing skirts, with the bold edge Lila's generation craved. I insisted on quality fabrics, not the cheap synthetics Vibe Vogue had been churning out. I brought in samples I'd sewn myself, showing the team techniques like French seams and hand-stitched linings, things they'd never learned in their fancy design schools. At first they resisted, calling my ideas retro. But when I showed them a prototype, a sleek blazer with a vibrant geometric print, they started to listen. One designer, a quiet girl named Sophie, even asked to learn my stitching method. It was a small victory, but it felt like a crack in their armor. Back home I kept my new role a secret. Mark called once to check in, his voice casual, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Karen sent a text inviting me to Thanksgiving, as if nothing had happened. Leela posted another Vibe Vogue photo, oblivious that her grandmother was reshaping her favorite brand. The secrecy gave me a strange thrill, like I was holding a winning card no one else could see. But beneath it, the hurt lingered. Leela's words, Karen's silence, Mark's neglect. I wasn't just doing this for me, I was doing it for every woman who'd ever been dismissed, every grandmother told she was too old to matter. By December, I had a plan, a new collection called Legacy, a name that carried the weight of my years and the strength of my defiance. I wasn't just saving Vibe Vogue, I was rewriting my story, and I was just getting started. By January I was living a double life. At home I was still Evelyn, the grandmother who baked pies and sent birthday cards, ignored or underestimated by my own family. At Vibe Vogue's New York office, I was a force, pouring every ounce of my heart into reviving a brand that had once been Liddy's altar. The hurt from that September barbecue, Liddy's sneer, Karen's silence, Mark's obliviousness, still stung, but it fueled me now like coal in an engine. I wasn't just rebuilding a company, I was rebuilding myself, stitch by stitch, proving I was far from the old woman my granddaughter had mocked. The designers at Vibe Vogue were starting to come around. Sophie, the quiet one who'd asked about my stitching, became my ally, her sketches showing hints of the elegance I was pushing for. The others were slower to warm up, but they couldn't deny the energy in the room when we finalized the Legacy collection. It was a bold mix, tailored dresses with vibrant prints, coats with clean lines but unexpected textures, skirts that moved like they had a story to tell. I'd insisted on models of all ages for the lookbook, especially women my age, because I was done with the idea that style belonged only to the young. The team grumbled at first, but when they saw the photos, silver-haired women in bold reds and deep blues, radiating confidence, they started to believe. The real test came in February, New York Fashion Week. I'd convinced the board to bankroll a runway show, a risky move for a company teetering on bankruptcy. But I didn't just want to sell clothes, I wanted to make a statement, to show Lila and the world that age didn't dim a woman's fire. Clara, who'd flown in to cheer me on, called it my reckless masterpiece. I spent weeks overseeing every detail, lighting, music, even the way the models walked. I wanted the show to feel alive, not like the sterile parades I'd seen on Lila's Instagram. The board was nervous, but I stood firm. Trust me, I told them, channeling the confidence I'd once used to convince George to take a chance on his dreams. The night of the show, I sat in the front row, my hands clasped tightly to hide their trembling. The venue was a converted warehouse, packed with fashion editors, influencers, and buyers, their faces lit by the glow of their phones. I wore a simple black dress from the collection, its subtle embroidery a nod to the hydrangeas on the dress Lila had mocked. The lights dimmed, and the music, a pulsing mix of classical strings and modern beats, filled the space. The first model stepped out, a 70-year-old woman named Gloria, her silver hair swept into a chignon, wearing an emerald green dress that hugged her curves. The crowd gasped, then murmured, their phones snapping photos. One by one the models walked, women in their 20s, 40s, 60s, each look a blend of timeless and cutting edge. By the finale, a 65-year-old model in a flowing crimson coat, the room was on its feet, clapping, cheering, some even wiping tears. I stayed in the shadows, letting the clothes speak. Backstage, Sophie grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. Evelyn, they love it, they love it. My phone buzzed with notifications. Vibe Vogue's social media was exploding. Influencers posted clips with captions like Vibe Vogue is back, and who's behind this? I overheard a young editor in the crowd say, this designer's a genius, who is this? My heart swelled, but I wasn't ready to step into the light yet. The creative director, a wiry man named Javier, had other plans. Evelyn, you need to take a bow, he insisted, practically pushing me toward the runway. I hesitated. I'd spent my life behind the scenes, making others shine, but Javier's urgency, and Clara's encouraging nod from the sidelines, gave me the push I needed. I stepped onto the runway, wearing a tailored suit from the collection, navy with a subtle gold thread, my silver hair swept up. The applause roared, louder than I'd expected, and for a moment I felt like I was floating. Cameras flashed, and I stood tall, not smiling, but owning every second of it. I was Evelyn Carter, 68 years old, and I'd just turned the fashion world on its head. After the show I slipped backstage, my heart still racing. Clara hugged me, whispering, George would be so proud. My phone kept buzzing. Lila had posted a clip of the show on Instagram, captioning it, Vibe Vogue is everything, obsessed. She had no idea I was behind it, and the irony was sweeter than any pie I'd ever baked. But beneath the thrill, the hurt lingered. Lila's post was a reminder of her cruelty, of how quickly she dismissed me. Karen and Mark hadn't reached out since the barbecue, their silence a weight I carried. I could have let that weight crush me, but instead it pushed me forward. Back at my hotel I met with Javier and the marketing team. They were buzzing about the show's success, orders were already coming in, and the stock was climbing. "We need to keep this momentum," Javier said. "Evelyn, you're the story here, a 68-year-old woman saving Vibe Vogue, that's the campaign." I laughed thinking he was joking, but his face was serious. "You should be the face of the brand." My stomach flipped. Me? On billboards? It was absurd, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. This wasn't just about clothes, it was about showing Lila, Karen, Mark and every doubter that I wasn't invisible. I nodded, my defiance burning brighter than ever. "Let's do it," I said, my voice steady. The game was changing, and I was ready to play. The morning after the fashion show, I woke to a world that felt both foreign and exhilarating. My phone was a storm of notifications, emails from buyers, texts from Clara, and social media alerts tagging Vibe Vogue. The Legacy collection was everywhere, splashed across fashion blogs and Instagram feeds, with headlines like "Vibe Vogue's stunning comeback" and "Who is the mastermind behind Legacy?" I sat on my hotel bed, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, marveling at how far I'd come since that September barbecue when Lila's sneer had cut me to the bone. Her words, "that dress is so old," still echoed, but now they were fuel, not wounds. I wasn't just Evelyn, the overlooked grandmother. I was the woman who'd taken a dying brand and made it sing, and I wasn't done yet. Javier's idea to make me the face of Vibe Vogue had seemed like a wild dream in the heat of the fashion show's success, but by March it was real. The marketing team moved fast, booking me for a photo shoot in a Manhattan studio. I stood under bright lights, wearing pieces from the collection, a sapphire blue dress with a tailored waist, a cream coat with bold stitching, while a photographer shouted, "Yes, Evelyn, own it." I felt absurd at first, a 68-year-old woman posing like some model half my age, but as the camera clicked, I thought of Lila's smirk, Karen's silence, Mark's neglect, and I straightened my spine. This wasn't vanity, it was defiance, a way to show my family and the world that I was still here, still vital. By April my face was on billboards across New York, Los Angeles and Chicago, the tagline "Style is Legacy" in bold letters beneath my image. I barely recognized myself, silver hair swept up, eyes steady, a woman who'd turned betrayal into triumph. The response was overwhelming. Vibe Vogue's sales soared, the stock price tripled, and my $200,000 investment was now worth millions. Talk shows called, wanting to hear the story of the 68-year-old fashion revolutionary. I did a segment on Good Morning America, talking about resilience and how style isn't bound by age. Letters poured in from women, some my age, others younger, thanking me for making them feel seen. One wrote, "I'm 72 and wore your dress to my grandson's wedding. I felt like a queen." Each letter was a reminder of why I'd done this, not just for me but for every woman who'd ever been dismissed as too old. Back home though, the air was thick with tension. I hadn't told Mark, Karen or Lila about my role in Vibe Vogue, letting them discover it on their own. Lila's Instagram was still full of Vibe Vogue posts. She'd even bought a dress from the Legacy collection, oblivious that her grandmother had designed it. Mark called one evening, his voice hesitant. "Mom, are you really running Vibe Vogue? I saw your face on a billboard." I heard Karen in the background, her tone sharp. "How could you not tell us?" I kept my voice calm. "It's been a busy few months, Mark. I've been working." He mumbled something about being proud, but it felt hollow, overshadowed by months of his silence after the barbecue. I decided it was time to face them. I invited the family to my apartment for dinner, a simple meal of roast chicken and mashed potatoes, the kind I used to make when Mark was a boy. I wanted them to see me, not just the billboard version, but the woman who turned their dismissal into something extraordinary. When they arrived, Lila was wearing a Vibe Vogue jacket from the Legacy collection, its geometric print catching the light. "This brand is so cool now," she said, tossing her hair, unaware of the irony. Then she noticed the framed billboard photo on my wall, me in that navy suit, staring out with quiet strength. Her jaw dropped. "Grandma, you're Vibe Vogue." The room went still. Karen's face paled, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Mark looked like he'd been hit with a brick, his eyes darting between me and the photo. I smiled, not warm but steady, and said, "Yes, Lila. That old dress you mocked? It inspired all of this." I let the words hang, watching their faces shift. Lila's cheeks flushed red, Karen's eyes dropped to the floor. Mark's mouth opened but no words came. The silence was heavy, filled with the weight of their betrayal and my triumph. Lila stammered, "I didn't know, Grandma." I mean, it's amazing, but her voice trailed off, her usual confidence crumbling. Karen tried to recover, saying, "We're so proud, Evelyn, but why didn't you tell us?" Her tone was too smooth, like she was covering for her silence that day in the backyard. Mark just looked at me, his eyes full of something like regret, but he didn't speak. I sipped my tea, letting them squirm. I'd spent months turning their dismissal into my strength, and now they were grappling with the reality of it. I could have let the moment be my revenge, letting their shock and shame be enough. But as I looked at Lila, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and guilt, I felt a flicker of the love I'd always had for her. She was young, reckless, but maybe not beyond saving. Mark too, he'd let me down, but he was still my son. Karen was harder to read, her polished exterior hiding something colder. I wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but I wasn't ready to burn bridges either. "Lila," I said, my voice firm but not cruel. "Words matter, you hurt me, but I'm giving you a chance to make it right." I paused, then added, "There's an internship at Vibe Vogue if you want it. Not a gift work." Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw a spark of respect. The night ended quietly, but the air had shifted. I'd laid my cards on the table, and now it was their move. The dinner table was quiet. After I revealed my role in Vibe Vogue's revival, the framed billboard photo on my wall casting a silent challenge over the room. Lila's shocked expression, Karen's forced smile, and Mark's guilty silence hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. I'd spent months turning their betrayal, Lila's sneer, Karen's indifference, Mark's neglect into a triumph that now stared them in the face. At 68, I'd become the face of a fashion empire. My image on billboards and magazine covers, my designs worn by women across the country. But as I looked at my family, their faces a mix of awe and shame, I faced a choice: hold on to the hurt and let my success be my revenge, or find a way to mend what was broken without losing the strength I'd gained. Lila broke the silence first, her voice small. "Grandma, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. What I said about your dress, I was just joking." Her cheeks were red, her usual bravado gone. I studied her, remembering the little girl who'd clung to my hand at the fabric store, her eyes bright with wonder. She'd hurt me deeply, but she was young, caught up in a world that prized trends over kindness. Karen chimed in, her tone too polished. "We had no idea you were capable of this, Evelyn. It's incredible." But her eyes didn't meet mine, and I sensed she was more embarrassed than proud. Mark finally spoke up, his voice heavy. "Mom, I should have paid attention that day. I didn't know Lila hurt you. I'm sorry." His words carried weight, the kind of regret that comes from realizing you've failed someone you love. I sipped my tea, letting their apologies settle. The hurt from that September barbecue still ached. Lila's words had been a blade, Karen's silence a twist, Mark's absence a bruise. But I'd turned that pain into something extraordinary, rebuilding Vibe Vogue into a brand that celebrated women like me. I could let their guilt be my victory, keeping them at arm's length to protect myself. Or I could choose family, not out of weakness but from the strength I'd earned. "Lila," I said, my voice steady but not harsh, "words aren't just words, they carry weight. You hurt me, but I'm willing to move forward if you are." I turned to Karen. "And you, Karen, you let it happen. I need more from you if we're going to be family." To Mark I said simply, "Be present, Mark. That's all I ask." They nodded, their faces a mix of relief and unease. I offered Lila the internship at Vibe Vogue, not as a handout but as a challenge. "You'll work hard," I told her. "Learn what it takes to create something real." Her eyes lit up, and she nodded eagerly. "I want to, Grandma. I mean it." Karen and Mark agreed to come to therapy with me, a step toward rebuilding trust. It wasn't forgiveness handed out freely, it was a door cracked open, one they'd need to walk through with effort. By summer, Vibe Vogue was a household name. The Legacy collection had sold out, and we were planning a fall line, this time with input from Sophie and even Lila, who'd started her internship in May. She was different at the studio, quieter, watching me with a respect I hadn't seen before. One afternoon she brought me a sketch, a simple dress with clean lines, inspired by the hydrangea dress she'd mocked. "I thought about what you said," she mumbled, handing it to me, "about stories in clothes." I smiled, tucking the sketch into my portfolio. "It's a start, Lila," I said, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of the bond we'd once had. Karen and I had harder conversations, often tense in therapy. She admitted she'd felt intimidated by me, always so self-assured, and her silence at the barbecue had been her way of avoiding conflict. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a step. Mark made good on his promise, calling weekly, even visiting the Vibe Vogue office to see my work. He teared up when he saw my designs on the racks, saying, "Mom, Dad would have loved this." Those words, more than any apology, healed something in me. The fall collection launched in September, a year after the barbecue that had sparked it all. I walked the runway again, this time in a deep burgundy dress, my silver hair loose, my head high. The crowd roared, but my eyes found Leela, Mark, and even Karen in the front row, clapping with genuine pride. Leela was wearing the dress she'd sketched, one we'd refined together. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Standing in my office later, looking out at the city skyline, I felt George's presence, his pride warming me like sunlight. I'd turned betrayal into a movement, not just for me but for every woman who'd been underestimated. Vibe Vogue was thriving, with stores opening overseas, and a scholarship program I'd started for aspiring designers over 50. Leela was learning, Mark was trying, and Karen was getting there. I'd built something bigger than revenge, a legacy of strength, creativity and love. As I pinned a new sketch to my board, I thought of that hydrangea dress, still hanging in my closet. It wasn't old anymore, it was the spark that had set me free. I wasn't just Evelyn Carter, the grandmother who'd been mocked. I was the woman who'd taken a sneer and turned it into a revolution. And I was just getting started.